so flat. So I appreciate you making the effort to come
hey,
across.
no problem. It's nice to get out of the house, Jim.
It's lovely here, isn't it?
Isn't
We
it
did
nice?
say that.
It is an amazing studio. It is genuinely very, very posh indeed. You're the roughest bloke that's ever been in here, I reckon.
I know. I had Ben Gulliver in here. No, actually, I didn't. No, so arguably, yes.
You are roughest.
I do mate Ravo as well. He's pretty rough.
Yeah.
He's from Hinckley, which is
Oh, right, yeah. Okay, so you're top two.
We say that Ian Wright was next door, just before us. Apparently,
Righty, my mate Righty.
Yeah, you said you know him.
Yeah, great mate of mine. Well, that's not true. I did like a motorbike day with this motorbike brand. Are we allowed, is this one of these things where we're worried about saying brands?
No,
and stuff?
You can swear, say brands. I'm wearing my Harley hat. You're going to say Triumph, aren't you?
Yeah. So I love Harleys as well. My mate works Triumph, so he's like, "Do you want to come and do this day where we just scud round a load of bikes?" Yeah. So Ian Wright's coming. I said, "Mate, I love Righty. I'm a Crystal Palace fan from the old days and an Arsenal fan. He's like number one, Righty and Brighty." And wicked day. And Ian Wright, he probably won't thank me. He won't hear this. He killed a clutch on one bike, completely killed it, and it was a brand new bike. Don't muck around on a bike, mind. He goes quick. And then we had this big day together, really good crack. And fast forward about 6 months, and I was somewhere that I'll say openly I don't really like that much. I don't love. I was at Soho Farmhouse, and I like the gym because I love working out. But I'm not massively keen on the Soho House vibe. But I was in.
What did Liam Gallagher say about Soho House in the Farmhouse? He said,
what did he say?
He said it's Butlins for rich cunts or something like that.
Yeah, it's just. Do you know what? It is just such outright privilege that it breaks me a bit. It's almost like no one's there showing off. Everyone there's nice, and it's just. I don't know. It's almost like it's contrived elitism. I don't know what it is. It's people paying an annual fee to go somewhere and then again be overcharged for something just to show everyone that they can afford it whilst being humble. And a lot of that is bullshit. What I'm thinking, I've probably got a chip on my shoulder.
It's cheap.
Because I'm from Maidstone.
Do I say I've got a membership there or not? It's cheap.
I had a membership for years, and I thought I don't actually go there. I don't like it, and I binned it, and I haven't missed it once in about 5 years. Anyway, right, I'm in the sort of the room there, having the restaurant bit, and Righty walks in, and was there with my girlfriend and her mum. They're like, "Oh, it's Ian Wright, it's your mate." I said, "Oh, it's Righty," and I said he won't recognise me, and he looked over, and from the other side of the room, he's like, "Oh," he pointed at me, his big leather jacket on, about 3 sizes too big. He walks over, takes his flat cap off, and I stood up and I said, "I bet you don't know my name." I was like, "Right." He walked over and went, "Big man." No idea, mate. No idea. I could hear my girlfriend saying, "Tell him your name." I was like, "No, he doesn't need to know my name. Big man's fine."
Well, he's right, big man. As we saw each other upstairs as we came in, you're looking incredible. Not that you weren't looking well before. I think it's the tan, but you had your. You can't say fanny pack. Yeah, bum bag. Bum bag. Yeah.
All into that, mate. I'm not in great shape. Jim, I went to the gym this morning. My seeing as we can plug brands, my mate Ollie Hayes, he says he played for Worcester and Bristol in the front row. I never saw him play. Carried bags a bit. He's got a gym called SoFit in Bath, and if you Google it, he's the guy that James Haskell had a massive rant on online and called his gym his wife's shed and said he was a nobody or something like that, and he'll always be skint, he'll always be a no, whatever it was. But Ollie Hayes, I was my first session back after a summer off with him this morning, and he weighs me in. He walks in. He's not of the new school. He's like, "Mate, you don't look that bad, but you do look fat. You look fatter than you should. So get on there." 126 kilos. That's a lot. I'm only 6 foot. That's a lot. I should be 120, 118, and I'm 126. So I'm not in great nick. And I also woke up this morning and I realised there are people who've played rugby and people who are in much worse nick than we are. We're walking around. We're fine. Like, we are okay. But my shoulders are shot. And I woke up this morning and my left shoulder, it's not that it doesn't work. It's just that it really hurts. And so I get to the gym and I said, "I'll warm up in a minute." But I took a coffee in the car on the way there and I couldn't drink it because I couldn't steer my left hand. I couldn't drink it with my left hand. And for Christ's sake, the whole workout, it didn't work. And even now, I've got to Paddington just now, an hour ago, and I'm looking in Boots for 55p for ibuprofen. How cheap's that?
Yeah, I don't take it. I need to actually need.
Yeah, but I don't take it. But I'm like, I was
cheap.
in so much pain that it's still knackered now.
That's my sob story. Yeah, it's cheaper than CBD.
Yeah.
But talking of rugby, and without topping you with pain, but I am in significant pain.
Are you?
Played in Billy.
Oh, yeah.
Clark's
How was it? Yeah.
Yeah, not great. So we played against the classic.
I'm calling it
Lions.
Ed Slater's game, by the way.
Yeah, we changed that. It kind of moved to Slater's game. And that's where I got roped in. So I was like a hard no. And then, obviously, having Slates in here, having done the cycle ride, I've now got the association with the hashtag 4Red. I'm in, and I'm starting. And you talk about the scales. Banners is playing.
Yeah.
So Matt Banahan, what do you reckon?
Well, he's what? So he's 6'7".
He's heavy. He's a heavy bloke.
115.
127.
Wow.
127
Oh, brilliant.
kgs.
He's heavier than me.
Heavy, and he looks big as well.
We don't want to body shame, but he's bringing shame on his family there, isn't he? He's let himself down badly. There's too heavy.
That's what I thought until he got out there and was carving up.
Of course
He's
was.
melting people.
He's a freak, mate.
Well, that's what I mean. That's the thing, Flat. So these lads have just retired. You've got him. You've got Garves, Matt Garvey as well, who is a big man.
He was a pro 5 minutes ago, Garves as well. Yeah.
And they weren't accepting this. This was the thing. Luckily, they were on my team, but still, like when they're carrying, even if they're stepping into your channel and hitting you, like you're feeling it. And we played against the Classic Lions, and they had a couple of big Tongan lads who they walked in, didn't smile. I'm thinking, fuck. Apparently, Phil Vickery gave them a team talk. So
cheers, Phil.
I do not want to play. So before the game, I can't piss about because I've got to be in it, right? So I've got to be heading to try and play the game properly. And there weren't one part of it that I enjoyed. Hooky was playing 10, James Hook for them. First handoff in the chest, whiplash. And I'm like, I fucking hate rugby.
Yeah.
I can't do it.
Yeah.
Contact. And then Banners, Alad Brew were going at it. Like, so you had the lads on there.
Alad Brew's a big man as well with a lot of power.
Who wanted it still? I was like, mate, you still want it. I don't.
Yeah.
Here's the gap. Take it. Don't run over me.
Yeah.
And he's trying to run over me. I'm trying to tackle him with my hands, and my hands ain't working.
Yeah. And I know from having spoken to you, watched you for a long time, played against you, and spoken to you since we retired, is you for a long time couldn't actually tackle with your shoulders. You had to tackle with your chest and arms because your shoulders were like jelly, same as mine. It's like if these 90-degree tackles, these chop tackles that Cowan Dickey and Joe Marler put in, one of those, recon for me. That is a recon straight away. Mate, if I'd have tried to drink this coffee I've got now an hour ago, I'm back in surgery. Never mind 90-degree tackles. It's like I can only tackle with my moves.
That was the only thing. Flats, the only thing in the whole game. We did a line out, scored a drive first up, went up in the air, hadn't jumped in 5 years, came down. Placement was great, landing was great. A few breakdowns. It was weird going into it. Closed arms. Do you know what I mean? So putting your head in there at first. A couple of carries, offloads, like went on the floor, knocked on. But I'm not going to be judged on that. It was the tackling. It was like when someone ran towards you, the body did not want to tackle. The shoulder didn't want to go low. It was like my hands. So my natural thing, and that's obviously guarding.
See, it's funny that, like, now if I won't play again because my shoulders are shot. My Achilles is, I injured my Achilles in 2004 and it's still bad now. Like there are still, I had to stop yesterday, I'm driving and I have to stop and take my shoe off and get out the car and do some exercise. It's too sore. And then the next day they'd be fine for a week and then it'll kill for a day and it's just a bit rubbish. So I think if I play it will snap. There's a lot of weight going through it these days. But like the one thing, I don't miss rugby at all, like I'm sure you don't, physically. The one thing I miss is collisions, like not rucks and scrums. I would love just once a month to have a few head-on tackles to make. Like I loved it. My shoulders didn't love it so much, but
the feeling.
Oh yeah, I'd love to. Not that I was a big hitter or anything like that. I didn't have the timing, but it was like I'd do the massive collisions. That is the only bit I crave. Like if I could just play a charity game and just have 10 people steaming into me, I would quite like that. And then go home. I'd miss a load of them, but I miss that bang bang. I don't miss anything else. It's the running in between I couldn't do, and the catching I couldn't catch it. Useless.
Wow. This was for #4Ed.
Well done, mate.
Big shout out, Slates.
He didn't ask me to play, and there's a lot of things I'm gonna would do, and hopefully will do for Ed. But he didn't ask me to play, and I'll be completely frank now. I didn't put my hand up. I didn't send him a text and say I'll play because obviously he's seen me, the nick I'm in, and doesn't want me anywhere near it in case I get hurt. But I will do something to help him because I sort of saw you guys playing and thought I could be doing that, and I'm not.
Yeah, well,
I'll do something else.
Well, I'll put on record that's me. I'm done.
Well done.
Yeah, when Hooky handed me off in that first play and I got stars, I was like,
not great from Hooky, that is it? Come on, Hooky, mate, play the game.
Genuinely, I was pissed off. And the next one, I thought if he does that again, I'm going to fucking smash him. And then he did it and literally, I just let him run past me. I was like, I'm a shell of my former self. It's embarrassing. Flats, let's talk about the lay of the land with rugby. Now, I know we could probably do this podcast for 3 hours. There's
a week,
so much to talk
Breaking
about.
only for water.
Of course, the Jim and Flats show.
Yeah.
Goody and Shanks are going to hate us, aren't they?
Yeah, they are,
It's important that me and you have a chat about this because we've had conversations about a couple of things around salary cap, around the concussion stuff. You were quite open with me. I loved it. You called me out. We had a chat about it. We did it how you properly meant to do it. But as we sit here now, because this is going to be evergreen, this is going to go out for months and years, and people are going to come back and be like, oh, these two
hold us to account.
Of course. So this is now the week after the Worcester stuff got announced. The lads have just been paid, but there's all this stuff going on with Worcester, the concussion stuff. Michael Littman interview has just been released this morning. We had a brief chat about that. But just as a whole, as a snapshot, you're in the media, I'm tier 2 media, but we're close to the game.
Yeah.
We're close to the game. And when you look at it from an English point of view, let's have a look at the Prem, because all these numbers got released. Are you confident that we're still going to be in and around the players? This game is still going to exist?
I think I am confident, but there's definitely an element of that is fingers crossed, because I want it to survive. I think rugby will survive, but I think that actually, as with a lot of things, turn on your telly. There's a lot of things that probably whose impacts could have been lessened had some sort of decisive action been taken earlier. And I think we're already using hindsight rather too much in English rugby. And I feel like it's easy for me to say because I'm just at home making toast and hoping else someone makes the decisions that keeps the game alive. It's not me doing it. So I'm being generous with someone else's livelihood and decision-making processes here. But I feel like some big decisions have to be made. I think on the concussion piece, the CTE piece, whatever you want to call it. You sent me this morning on WhatsApp the clip from Michael Littman on Twitter on a chat show in Oz. I was with Lippy a couple of weeks ago in Oz. A few weeks ago we met up, old teammates at Bath, of course, and horrible, absolutely awful. I'm an old teammate and mate of Steve Thompson's and played against Alex Popham, and I know these guys like you do, same generation of players. But I feel like I think if rugby is to survive, and I think by survive I mean not can rugby's various governing bodies withstand all the lawsuits that are coming, because there will probably be a precedent set there which allows the unions to survive those, even if there are payouts or whatever. I can't see these lawsuits folding the global game, because the global game existed before money was around and before professionalism started, and there's a lot of rugby was played before the game went pro and all those things. But I think that there are some steps to be. I think rugby needs to be decisive at some point. And World Rugby, we know. I listened to your pod with Dr. Phil Ribbons, which was great. Professor Phil Ribbons, which was great. And World Rugby, again, as he said, laudably are investing in research and that stuff, and that's great. And with that, will those results will hopefully bring, will help justify some reasonably aggressive action on it. But I really that it's about, are mums and dads going to want their kids playing rugby in the next 20 years as a rule? I mean, there will always be some that just do, but I think it's about those people who are undecided, and they want their kids to have a thing. They want their kids to play a bit of sport at school or at weekends. What sport do they pick? Because of course the kid guides that to a point, but I didn't pick rugby. My dad picked rugby for me. So I was always going to play rugby because I was from a rugby house, but it was kind of chosen for me. I'm very pleased it was. I couldn't have done anything else.
He saw you eating 5 bowls of
Alpen.
Cereal.
Yeah, exactly,
every morning.
Exactly, yeah. Whole milk. And it's, it was obvious, and genetically it was obvious, whatever. So there's that. I think does the game survive? So in one sense, are the unions forced to pay out so much money in lawsuits that the professional game folds? I feel that's unlikely, and I hope it doesn't happen. I want the best for the guys. But also it's about participation and numbers and how many kids play and all that kind of stuff. So there's all sorts of interesting conversations about the removal of tactical substitutions. And also I think, like, why does it have to be permanent? Why don't we trial it for 2 seasons? 2 seasons or 3 seasons or 1 season is nothing. It's nothing. It's a click of the fingers. It's just no time. Why don't we try it? And to that end,
try what specifically?
Try what? Why don't you have fewer players on a bench? Why don't you have no substitutions, no tactical substitutions? So the game is all powerful. All anyone talks about. You and I have spoken about it. These young fellas, they're all massive units and all that stuff. Well, lots of players, more than half a team is replaceable within 80 minutes. So lots of players don't, or very rarely have to play 80 minutes of rugby. Now, if you want to reduce someone's power, make them run. That is why the world's strongest men, don't look like bodybuilders a lot of the time. They don't move any further than they have to. So if you want to take it from a sort of a serve and volley game, you sort of Ivan Isavic, take it to a Nadal and longer rallies, more fitness, all that sort of stuff. More minutes would mean that. Of course, there's, I feel like that is at least worthy of trying. It's at least worth trying. And then that kind of combines, it kind of combines with the financial thing, but I'll get to that in a sec. I think where we went when all the red cards for high tackles started happening, it felt mad. It felt like you can't have a game now without a red. It still feels a bit like that sometimes, but I think for so long it was such a big adjustment was needed for, the safety of people playing is the most important thing. Not just us lot in the pros. We get the best medical care. It's Bob and Sue on a Sunday morning on their own in a field somewhere in Somerset. That's who it's really about. It felt a bit crazy, and there was probably, we might still be in it, a period of overcompensation. But I think that's necessary because so little was happening beforehand in terms of safety, and so much was allowed because we loved it and everyone loved it. Like State of Origin now is not as much brawling, but when there was brawling, you fucking loved it and I fucking loved it and they fucking loved it and the fans fucking loved it, right? That's the point. But that isn't good enough anymore in rugby. It's still good enough in boxing and MMA. In rugby, it's not good enough anymore. It's becoming more transparent. People are scrutinising it more and more, and rightly, because it's the safety of themselves and their children that we're talking about. So I think it'll probably come back, and there will be a slightly more common sense approach to refereeing, and it'll get more and more common sense led as time goes on. I think it's getting there a bit now. There will always be anomalies. There will always be stuff we disagree with, but then that sort of pulls it into the financial piece, and that's a much larger conversation. And again, it's worth asserting that I am not an expert. We are not experts in this. These are just opinions, and a lot of them are speculative. Their guesses really is what they are. Slightly educated guesses, but guesses really. And Premiership rugby, English rugby clubs spend too much money. They spend more money than they bring in as a rule. So people just sort of glibly say rugby's a business now. Well, it is, but it's not a very good one. It's not a business that works. It's a loss-making business year after year after year in almost every case. So maybe if you have fewer subs, maybe you don't need as many players in your squad. Maybe that's a way to save money. Of course, that means some lads are going to not have contracts, which is brutal. But it currently spends too much money. So it's a massive answer to it feels like a massive answer, but there's so much to talk about. But there is the physical safety and financial safety are the two major issues facing rugby at the moment, and specifically English rugby. Worcester's given everyone a shock. I absolutely agree with what Steve Diamond said, that they are just the first club to potentially fall, but there are other clubs that are perilously close to being in the same situation, and that's not good enough. But you can change it. It's not dead. You can change it, but there needs to be some decisive action, and there will be lots of mini injustices. There will be lots of, in inverted commas, sort of financial casualties and casualties in terms of employment. Lots of P45s handed out, which is brutal. But if something isn't done, eventually, you are crossing your fingers that the game survives, and that won't be enough because there are lots of other viable alternatives for people to go and do. Yeah,
it feels like that for sure.
Also, I'm going on now. That also buys into the whole thing about growing the game, whatever that means, growing the game. I do think that the whole safety thing is massively important when it relates to concussion, when it relates to CTE, early onset dementia. It's massively important. But I'm not one of these glib ex-pros that says don't over-sanitize the game or it loses the game's gone soft. I don't believe that. I think rugby is way harder than it ever was. It's way harder. It's horrible. Less violent, but way harder on the body than it was when we played than it was 30 years ago. Well, so I do think those things, but I do think that a sort of an acceptance from people who make decisions in rugby and people who are involved in rugby that rugby actually isn't for everyone is fine. I think that's fine. Rugby is not for everybody. There are some people who don't want any part of a sport that aggressive or confrontational. Some people don't like team sports. They're like whatever. This whole thing that we have to make rugby appeal to everybody, and we have to sanitize it to sort of reduce the controlled violence within it to such a point that it appeals to everyone. Firstly, you'll never get there. Secondly, I don't think you need to aim that wide. Rugby, it's just okay. For rugby's not a tiny sport; it's a huge sport. It's nothing like football, but it's big. but it doesn't have to be for everybody. And I think if that is your aim, that's somewhere you might never get.
And I think it's a point of time that we're in where we've all got an opinion. Everyone's got an opinion. Everyone are problem makers as opposed to problem solvers. That's arguably what we are, because we're talking about it. So we're making a problem that is already a problem, but we've got no solutions apart from some of them, which we'll go through, like in terms of ideas that you've got. But I look at the NFL now. They've managed, I know it's a completely different sport, but they've managed to migrate their way through such a tough period with the lawsuits that they went through, the player welfare issue that they went through, to the point now where, you know, Lady Gaga's there, Eminem, fucking 50 Cent. There's this big fanfare around it. All the sponsors are coming in. It feels like we're in the middle of this. I don't even want to call it drama, because it's much needed drama. And I know we spoke a while ago around my initial views on rugby and how us as young men, as boys, as young adults, signed up for what we signed up for at that time. And obviously a lot has changed since then. More knowledge has come out. But it feels like NFL has managed to get through that commercially and from a numbers point of view. The worry is, though, I think, is around the kids. Like my wife, for example, and I'm happy to put this out there, doesn't really want my kids to play rugby. And and it's not necessarily based on the head injuries or anything like that. It's more about the state of my body coming through the door. And I try and say to her, look, well, you know, we would never have this life. We wouldn't have the kids. You know, you wouldn't be with me. I'd be on the building site. Do you know what I mean? With whoever else. So this wouldn't have happened. But I think there is a worry, isn't there? Because of the time that we are now in, and there's so much other choices, you know, online, gaming, all these things. And I suppose just trying to give the listeners, Flats, like the reasons to do it. Like, are we going to get through this? How long do you think it's going to take? Because it feels like we are right in the middle of it.
Well, I think firstly, I'm not an NFL expert by any means. I like the odd highlights package and that sort of stuff, but I know bugger all about it. What I feel reasonably confident of, though, is that the NFL didn't just weather the storm and get through it. I expect there were some very big decisions from some very clever people who were heavily invested in the sport to get them through it, because nothing, I think, probably except football, nothing is invincible in professional sport. No sport is invincible as a professional entity. So I don't know if it could have killed the NFL altogether, but it could have done it a lot more damage than it did. So it's probably, in some respects, really poorly managed, hence the payouts, hence the problem. But in other senses, probably well managed, you know, in the aftermath of actually some very real tragedy. So I think rugby has to really think about it. It has to be clever. It also has to be dynamic. So I think that the pros and cons of playing, the benefits of playing rugby, the benefits of playing a team sport, I feel, you know, I love football as well, and I like lots of other sports, but rugby is particularly special because physically it's so hard. So I do buy into the fact that rugby needs to be a particularly edgy, aggressive, horrible sport. I don't mean people getting gouged and punched and kicked. I mean, there needs to be some physical jeopardy. You need to be worried about getting smashed. You need to get your body positions right. It needs to be a little bit threatening. Threatening enough that you feel nervous before you play. That's all I mean in terms of control contacts. And I think that is part of the charm. Equally, that's what makes it, yes, it's a bit risky, but it makes it particularly special, because as you will know, and a lot of your listeners will know, but some won't, which is fine. When you go to really, really tough, you're in really, really tough physical spots with people, and you make it through, and you rely on them and they deliver for you, and they rely on you and you deliver for them, or you let them down and they forgive you and they try again and they still fight for you. It is particularly special, and it's probably a reduced version of what it's like to be in the forces. So the risks are, you know, minute compared with that, but you'll have acquaintances that were in special forces. You will have military acquaintances. I have too. There is a bond that is really hard to replicate in, I think, an office arena, because they're emotionally stressed in terms of stress levels. You can be in really tough spots. There's something about being really physically up against it and digging in for each other. It's like the Michael Littman thing, you know, whatever anyone thinks about the whole concussion thing, whatever it is, I went out with him and played 100 times, and that bloke was, as Dean Schofield, the ex-Sale Sharks lock, said to me, he was tougher than coffin nails. Like an unbelievably tough bloke. When you play rugby with Lewis Moody, it's just an unbelievably tough bloke. I could see him not for 5 years, and when I see him, I love him. I love Lippy because I saw him for an hour in Australia a few weeks ago, and I will never forget what he did for us and for me, and vice versa, and all that. So I think they are wonderful things to have. You've got built-in mates at a rugby club. That's the same for any team sport. Socially, they're great. I think the sort of lads is probably less laddie than it really was. There's still a bit of that, which is fine because it's fun. But I feel like the rugby clubs I go to, there's a couple of rugby clubs locally that I go to semi-regularly. I live in Bath, and we end up at lots of places, don't we? It feels like one of the most universally accepting environments I can imagine. And it's, we never realised when we were playing that we're playing with lads from Fiji, Tonga, Samoa. I played with Moroccan Muslims. I played with Abdel Benazi and his brother Khalid, and we didn't know or care where anyone came from. And this was, and we didn't quite realise that it was giving us a wonderful grounding for life. But I think there are many, many pros to playing rugby. There is a physical risk, and there will always be a physical risk. And I'm not going to be so glib as to say, well, you can fall out of a tree when you're climbing a tree. But if you choose to play rugby, you know that you might get injured every now and again, and that's all right. But I think the head issues, the concussion issue, the brain damage issues are, which ostensibly is what they are, I think that until we can, get as much information as quickly as possible on that and publicise it widely and clearly, and until we can actually take some real steps to show that we are, apart from yellows and red cards, that's good, that's working, I expect, or I hope, but actually take some real steps to experiment with new things for kids as well as for pros. I think there is going to be a larger number and a growing number of parents who say no thanks.
Yeah.
So we have to take those steps in order that people then feel confident to let their kids play or themselves go and play, and then they can reap the benefits of such a great team sport.
Yeah, I think when you look at the game now, and it's changed, I've been retired 5 years. What are you? You not?
10 years.
10 years.
Yeah.
The difference between even the 5 years when I played to what it is now, the difference, the space between elite professional rugby and grassroots, it's not even comparable. Now, I don't know what the numbers are with injuries and stuff like that, and it's obviously important that we're talking about this for not just the elite level, but to save grassroots schoolboy and girl rugby, and for the interests of parents to get their kids into rugby so we don't lose it in the future. But there is a big difference, isn't there, between the elite of the elite, what we're seeing now, to turning out for your local rugby club and all the positives that you've just outlaid, the values, the sense of inclusion from whatever walk of life that you come from. Like what we did is not normal. The path to where we got to, which ultimately was the top, and then you've got the elite of elite on top of that.
Yeah,
that isn't a path that many people will make. So when we talk about rugby, we're talking about it on a slightly different level because we're talking about the guys who are getting paid. I interviewed Ben Gulliver, these guys that are in the championship, they're getting paid, but they're not getting paid enough. But when actually the masses are not going to get paid, and I think that's important that what you talking about them things. Because that is the worry, isn't it? That you go into a rugby clubhouse in 5-10 years' time, probably a little bit further down the track, and people can't field teams, especially in England where the numbers are so high. And that is, I suppose, the worry at the minute, and where, I put something out on Twitter before, and we can get onto this stuff, is rugby fucked? Because there is a feeling of that.
I think because we're in the middle of it, there's a feeling of that, but we haven't really approached any sort of resolution yet. You'd hope that these panels of people are thinking about, the governing bodies are thinking about how to fix it, but it's not just how to fix it for now. It's like if someone else comes in and God willing, at the point of recording, no one's come in and bought Worcester as far as we know. I'd love someone to go in and buy Worcester and, get the sandwiches out for the lads and get the new kits printed up and away they go. Wouldn't that be great? But it ultimately doesn't serve to solve the problem in the medium to long term, which is Premiership rugby clubs spend more money than they have, so they spend beyond their means. So, it's not just rugby. That's not just rugby players. The obvious place to reduce that is salary cap. But do you need all these people working behind the scenes? And I realised I was one of them for a couple of years, and there was a point where I'm thinking I've got a nice salary, not cushy job's the wrong way to put it, but a cushy job. my hometown club. I live across a field from the Farley house. That's where I lived then. And I was like, I just don't need to be here. The club would be absolutely fine if I left, and yet they're paying me this money. And there was a few of us probably in those positions. And, I think, steps have to be taken in order to convince people. That's just the pro game. I don't think the finances of the pro game particularly affect the amateur game, amateur attendances, except if clubs start folding and suddenly there's no pro game to go and watch in your area. There's that sort of stuff. So I think the foundations of a lot of these Premiership clubs are, fundamentally a bit wobbly because it's just one rich dude in a lot of these clubs. One rich person hopefully sticking around and being willing to lose millions, and that's great. But when they get tired of it, football seems to have a never-ending conveyor belt of people that want to buy these clubs for zillions of quid. Rugby may have that, it may not. So I think getting the house in order financially would, at least sort of guarantee in the medium to long term that Premiership Rugby and whatever guys, the Premiership Rugby clubs all still exist and can thrive, albeit paying out less money, losing less money, ideally no money, and maybe even making a bit. Then you start thinking about the sort of the safety piece and thinking, well, the quicker we can demonstrably take steps on that, I think the more readily we will reassure parents. Because I've got 3 girls, one's a baby, she don't count yet, she can't play. My girls played a bit of touch rugby in the summer down in Devon a few weeks ago. They've never done it before. I've never tried to push them into it, and they loved it. And they haven't mentioned it. They're starting school again in a couple of days. They haven't mentioned playing any rugby at school. They can if they want. It will be touch at their age, I think. I would be 50-50. I would want to know about the coaching. I would want to know a bit more. I've got mates whose kids have had concussions and they're completely right with it. That's fine. I'm not. They could be. They're not right or wrong. I'm uncomfortable with that. I'm uncomfortable, and when I was young, everyone wanted to box. Yeah, let's go to a boxing club. And my parents were like, go if you want, but you're not. You don't want to be. We don't want you to be a boxer because we know what happens. They get brain damage. But what you need to do is take real demonstrative steps before rugby gets to the point where people say, no way. You know what happens with rugby players? Their heads are all gone by the time they're 50. You got to take steps now-ish to get that done, to reassure people. But they have to, not just for reassurance, but for safety. But with an acceptance, a very open acceptance that rugby will always be a bit dangerous, because it will. And I think that's okay, but it only to a point.
So to close this part of it, I think you gave some solutions as a problem solver, not a maker. So, and we are different on a few things, which is great. That's the whole part of the conversation. I mean, you've mentioned substitutions. So would you say right now? I mean, it could change. That's fine. Changing your mind in the future, listeners, is fine.
Changing your mind's fine. I spoke to Sean O'Brien, Irish rugby legend, about it a couple of months ago. We're at a thing. What do you reckon? He goes, I wish people would just leave the game alone and stop it. And I thought, it's a really interesting perspective, because it seemed obvious to me to stop the tactical substitutes. Then I think, well, think about myself in the last 20 minutes of half the games I played 80 minutes in over the years. You could argue it was unsafe for me to be out there. I was so fucked, mate.
That's my point.
Yeah.
But anyway.
So fucked. There was one game I played against Leicester, and they always said, if you give us everything, it was a Prem semi-final, boiling hot, up at Welford Road, you give us everything, and if you put your hand up. And it was me against Castro Giovanni. So I started the game, and Castro had a couple of good scrums. He had one good scrum after half time. So the first half, he was... Can I get technical for a sec?
Yeah, please.
Right, front row is 3 on each side, heads to the left. So Castro would wait till I was set, and he'd step right. Shoots, or George, whoever it was, would say step. He'd say step, and they'd step right. And I think George said step. I can't remember. He might pull me up on that when he listens to this. But Castro Giovanni would set up outside me. So I'm meant to be to his left. But as I look at him, and he's slotting in between me and Lee Mears, he was to my left. So I said to the ref, he's outside me. Because what he's trying to do is whack in on me and get me on an angle, shove my head in towards the hooker, swing my hips out, go straight through. Illegal, but good on him for trying. No problem with that. I said, he's outside me. So a couple of times we go to engage, bit of a shit fight. And, no one chins anyone, but it's a bit messy. Goes down, goes up. And I said to the ref, I got to the scrum, and I was smiling at this point from memory. My memory could be inaccurate. And I said, he's outside me. It's heads to the left, mate. It always has been. And I watch him, and I just said, watch him. And Castro literally stepped to his right, outside me. And I said, look at him. And the ref basically looked at me like, one more complaint, you're getting done. So I was so angry at that point. I steamed through Castro, had a massive scrum. We had a couple of big scrums in that half, and things were going great. After half time, he had one good scrum, and then he's given it all the Vamos chat. Vamos! I was like, where have you been for the last 45 minutes, pal? All right, he's a legend, and I'm jealous. But he bounced me at one point when he had the ball as well. I went up high, missed him, but not good. So I'm bitter. But then I was flat out in this game, and it was hot, and I was a bit fat and whatever. So I was, about 55, 60 minutes, I'm toast, and the physio comes on to treat someone else, and he says to me, "How you doing?" I said, "I'm fucked, mate. I'm done. I've never said that ever. I am done. I'm absolutely empty." And he said, "You've got to stay on for a bit. You've got to stay on for a bit." Coley comes on. Dan Cole comes on. Decent unit in the end, he turned out to be. And I remember going into a scrum and bending down, and my legs were shaking with fatigue before I engaged. I'm knackered. So I'm up for it, but I'm just tired, mate. And Coley gets a penalty, kick the points. Coley gets another penalty, kick the points. We lose whatever it was by those points is how I remember it. They subbed me off after I asked to be subbed off. Bring on Nathan Catt, who does a great job, stands up perfectly well to Dan Cole, no problems. And it's like, if they couldn't, we lost the game anyway. But I'm thinking if I'd been on there another 15, 20 minutes, but
You're wanting that for Fraser Balmain now, aren't you?
I want Fraser. I want Fraser doing 90s. Right. My point is, it would be uncomfortable for a period of time. But if you want the game to become slightly more aerobic, anaerobic, don't know which one, and less power, then actually Fraser Balmain he's not a giant bloke. He's a big, strong man. He's a big old block. His physique would have to change a little bit, just a little bit. He would end up naturally probably being a couple of kilos lighter, better in fitness tests, a bit more Super Rugby of the old generation than Prem, a bit less top 14. And I think that's all right. So I think there would be an uncomfortable period, but I don't think it'd last that long. If you give the teams enough warning, then you change your pre-season a bit. And Fraser spends 8 or 9 weeks running a lot more. That's actually what happens. And you get fitter. Like I was substituted on 55, 60 minutes repeatedly for years, and I felt absolutely fine. When somebody was injured and I could play 80, I very often felt absolutely fine after 80 minutes. There were some times when I was hanging, but I often did 80 and felt great. Great's relative. But the idea of everyone getting tired together, I think, seems sensible to me, and I've got no medical qualifications whatsoever to back that up.
So no substitutes, but more blood capsules will come in then, won't
they? Oh, yeah.
Anyway, we won't
Dean
get
Richards
into that.
was not the only one.
Oh, we know that.
Everyone was doing it, not everyone.
Simon Cohen said, sat in that chair opposite you.
I'm halfway through that pod. I haven't finished.
Quote unquote, that's what he said. And he spoke about the game's reset that it needs, which we're going to come on to. So lastly, to close that, so no subs, anything else? So when you're there and you're loving your ruggers and you're watching it all unfold on social media, you're thinking potentially the subs, and if you could have another one, not that's going to happen, but if you could have one. What
have you got? I think quite an interesting one might be the jackal. I think what would happen to the game if you ruled out a jackal? One thing people say is rule out a box kick. You can't rule out the box kicks. Firstly, it's an art form when it's done right and it's really effective. Secondly, if you're 15, 80 metres from your own line and I'm defending your attack, you're defending your own line and I'm defence. If I know that box kick is not an option and you pick and go, the first two defenders can deal with that. Everyone can steam at your 10 who's going to kick the ball, and it's actually an unfair advantage to the attacking team, probably. So I think you can't rule out box kicking. It has to be an option to keep defences honest, I think. And as for limiting the numbers of them, I don't know about that. I think you've probably just got to live with it. But I think ban it. I find myself wondering, not very often, I'll admit, what would happen to the game if you ban jackling. I jackled
a lot of
once.
Injuries.
I jackled once in 14 years.
How did it feel? I love the jackal. Not that it's about shoulders, me, mate. But I'm going to tell you, I was unreal at the jackal, mate.
You're lucky because you're 6'9", but you got long arms. For me, it was like, imagine cutting your arms off at the elbow. It was like trying to get those around a ball. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? Like arms like a crocodile, mate.
Just waiting to get blasted.
I'm in this position, and if someone hits my shoulder, it's coming out. It's either one is definitely coming out.
Yeah.
So I wasn't an option for me, and luckily Jacqueline really came in after I. What do you think to that? What do you think would happen to it?
I could arguably see that being changed because there's been some horrific injuries of lads now, and this is the whole evolution of the game. Like, so once someone gets good at jackling, well, you've got to find a way of clearing them out. So then you evolve and you play close to the line around the laws and the rules of that. Like at Saracens, I remember, I mean, as many people listen to this as you know, I was a bench player, cannon fodder effectively. So I'm the man in training because I just taught myself up there because I was half decent at jackling.
Personal assistant to the Saracens second rows.
Yeah, exactly. Jim, get in there. Get in there.
Yeah.
Right. Young Marrow, have a run up at that. Billy, have a run up at that. Oh, I can't clear him. So next thing, they're coming in at the side and then they're fucking rolling me out.
Yeah.
I'm like, ja. You know, I've only got 1 year left on my contract, so I didn't want to be in there again. So Kelly Brown got himself in there, and then Petrus was getting fucking blitzed out as well.
Yeah.
So we were the cannon fodder. But that's what I mean. I do agree with you around the jackal. I think
I just think
it would quicken the game.
It feels massive. And I think it ain't massive if you try it for a season. It ain't massive. Just try it. Try it. Give everyone fair warning. Help all the coaches. Give them. You're not changing it by Tuesday. Try it. You know, I think the banning box kicking thing doesn't work. Another thing that I think doesn't work is bringing back rucking. And I like the idea of it in principle because we all liked shooing people, which was great.
I love getting shooed as well.
Loved getting shooed. Loved it. I got properly hurt once, but that was generally because someone just trod on a soft bit and a sort of a kidney shot, and it wasn't deliberate. And he's a good bloke, Steve Thompson. And although he did stamp on both my hands deliberately and broke them both in the same game. Don't worry about it. But that's because we're mates. And that was different. He loved that. But it was... what was I talking about? Yeah, the ruck. It's nice in theory, and it's less for the refs to look at. The refs got virtually an impossible job, infinite variables, and it's less work for the refs too because the players are self-regulating at that point if you're shooing people out. I do not agree that the game would be quicker. I think it would slow the game down. Like you watch the old videos and it's like, oh yeah, stamp, it's kicking the crap out of him. It's great. As long as it's not a stamp and it's a ruck, it's great. The ball is slow. Like the ball is really slow. The conditioning of these players when they're playing, you almost can't score with slow ball. You need the game to be quick, really, really quick. So I think reintroducing rucking is a lovely romantic idea, but in practice, I don't think it works because it actually takes quite a long time to get someone your size out of the way, longer than it does quite often to get a jackler out of the way or someone who has a bite and goes. If you know that you can lie there a bit until you get shooed out, the game slows down, I think, in practice.
Away from the safety of the game, which is obviously what we want to talk about, but now we're segueing. You'd hate this one, okay? So scrum, free kick, and then they go for the scrum again. And I loved scrummaging. I loved it. Slowed the game down.
Yeah.
Used to love pushing. Yeah. But I don't think you should be allowed to do it. I think it needs to be a tap and go, play away. As often as possible. Speed up the game.
I don't agree with that because it's not because I love scrums. I get as bored by scrums that take forever as you do. I've got a different solution to that. But scrum clock doesn't work. Like in terms of stop the clock for scrums doesn't work because then it's like take as long as we want them. And the TV companies can't have that. They need to know roughly when they're getting off air. TV is very important to the game of rugby. There's no money there without it. So we accept that. So putting a clock on scrum, stopping the clock doesn't work because it effectively, gives you carte blanche, a version of, or it relaxes it a bit. There's a huge amount of pressure on referees. What you're saying is, turn the tables. I can give away a free kick. I can go early, a 5 metre scrum where you're going to try and punish us. I can go early and give away a free kick, and you can't scrummage against me again. I've got to get out. I can get out. I can give away. We can take turns giving away free kicks. It's really, really easy to give away a free kick in a scrum. Just go in early. There's lots of things you can do to give. Well, that's one. There aren't that many, but you can give away free kicks. Okay, and if I've given away 2 or 3, and the ref says, "Do you know what? That's enough. It's a penalty now." Then actually they can just sub me off and bring on another guy, and he can give away 2 or 3 before he gets into trouble. There you've got 5 or 6.
Yeah, but you said he can't because he's not coming off.
No, currently, if you change your law and not mine, it's magic wand stuff. It doesn't work because it gives someone a get out, and whether you think that's cynical or nobody would do it, somebody would do it. I played against Wasps. I love Wasps. I love Lowell and Oyers boys. They went on, dominated a brilliant team. I played against Wasps in the era when they just so often went to uncontested scrums. And I realise I'm saying this publicly and it might turn out to be twice ever. My memory is they repeatedly went to uncontested scrums because their scrum was good but not great and the rest of their game was great and it got them away with it. I was on the field in I think it was a Premiership semi-final, I think it was, or playoff, something like that, against Wasps. And I came off the bench, impact the finishers, yeah? I mean, by my reckoning, I would never have got on the field that day, but yeah, I got there, I got an appearance, got an app, and got your match bonus, didn't. And I got on, and I watched, and I was like, I'm coming on, and I'm going to kill this scrum. That's all I'm doing. I'm not good at anything else. I'm going to kill them. And they knew I was going to get into them. They knew it was coming. Not that I was some scrummaging god, but they were tired. We had a better scrum than them, and I was better than the guy who I was playing against, who, in brackets, was out of position, right, playing on the other side.
Let's name him.
No, not naming him. It's not fair. He's a good bloke. Because the reason I say he's a good bloke is because I know him, but also I haven't asked him if I can name him. I am confident, I could be wrong, I am confident I saw someone come on and tell him, you need to go down. And I am confident I saw him say, not doing it, I'm not doing it. And they said, you fucking are doing it. And he basically did it and wouldn't look at me. Because he was given team instructions like Formula One, you get off the field now. So I come on ready to kill people, tear up trees in the scrum. It's a close match. I'm going to win us penalties. I'm going to get us field position. I'm going to toast this bloke. And he goes off with a mystery injury that he didn't have before I came on. And
you're absolutely worthless now.
I'm now worthless because what am I going? I'm a liability around the field, mate. What am I going to do? I'm like a tree stump around the field. So I'm like, right, and I played in that. I played through it, and it was unbelievably frustrating. So if there is a get out and I can give a quick free kick away, and then I don't have to scrummage against Julian White, there is every chance I'll give that free kick away because it's not because I'm worried about it, but because this could cost us. So I don't think it works.
I think deep-rooted, you're a scrummaging purist, as we know. And it's great that you give the detail and you feel that way about it.
Do you know what I would do? If I was going to put a clock on anything, I'd put a clock on scrum setups. I think they're the biggest waste of time. It's as bad as... it was no better when I played. We were exactly the same. Looking back and looking at the game now, it takes way too long to set a scrum up. It's like a minute. When I'm watching games on whatever website, or I can fast forward 15 or 30 seconds at a time... I see the ref give a scrum. We watch a lot of rugby. You got to click through it. I can quite often hit 30 seconds, bang, bang, twice, and I haven't missed the start of a scrum. That is too long. It shouldn't be. That doesn't take that long to set up a scrum. And again, it's removing a little bit of rest from the game. It's a little bit more fatigue, which reduces power a little bit. Other than that, it's just dead time.
We can keep talking about.
I'm bored myself now.
No, because one of the point of differences for you in the media is talking about the scrum, and you're obviously adding that to it. I think it's important. You're getting decent feedback from people. Are they enjoying that?
Yeah, the best thing is, Jim, that if you speak about something with enough confidence, people think you're definitely right, and they think they didn't know that before. And I make most of it up, mate. But you go, thanks for your insight. I'm like, oh, mate, I've got a clue. I've made it up. Quite often, I have said stuff like that I think they fell over. I don't quite know. The whole we should have scrum refs, because somebody will listen to this and say we should have scrum refs at every game. Don't agree. Like someone like me, or like Rassie Erasmus said, Joe Marler should be a scrum ref. I mean, I'm sure Joe Marler's got bigger plans than that, to be honest. But it's like we would get loads wrong. We would need loads of replays. It would take loads of time. We would get loads wrong watching it live. That's the reality. I reckon there is a really good chance that ex-professional props and front rowers would get as much, if not more, wrong than current referees. That's what I think.
Free kick and play away.
If you got to do it straight away is what I mean.
Yeah, that's why we should free kick and play away, Flash. Salary cap. Now we are different on this again. You might manipulate me with your depth of answer. You might convince me that I think differently. Now, just hear me out on this. A few different things, and you can give your opinion and tell me why I'm potentially wrong. I understand the state of the game. We can see it. I've kind of known the state of the game for a while, as probably you have as well, and we felt it's not sustainable. And then now as these big dogs come through, let's use Maro, Genji obviously came out, just to name two at the start. And then we start to hear the rumours of salaries coming in. We can name them. Guys like Bigger, 700 grand plus.
Jesus.
40 wants the same.
You can't live on that in Northampton, mate. You can't.
Well, there's no all you can eat Chinese, so if you're in there every night, potentially, because that's gone up 30 quid. And you've got... Obviously, 40 wants a salary. Then Faz goes in and says, well, look, if these are getting paid that, then the marquee player comes in. Pietau's on £1 million. So-and-so's going to come in. He wants 850 grand as a marquee. The South Africans start coming in. Then all of a sudden, it kind of spirals out of control. Then the Saracen stuff happens. I know we spoke about the Saracen stuff on the phone, and you convinced me to understand the sustainability of Saracens by having a John Smith bring through Jamie George, and we can talk about that as well. But I'm quite big on this, and I understand the state of the game at the minute. And there's a part of me that looks at now with Worcester and the players, whether or not they're bought out and whether or not it materialises, that these players can't go elsewhere in the Prem because they're now cut off with a salary cap. I know they're talking about potentially opening that back up solely for the players. But we're talking about the game, what we've played in, one of the most physical games on the planet, one of the best games on the planet. Yet the ability isn't there, and I know other teams and I know that other sports have salary caps, I just can't see, and I'm not talking about an endless pot of money. I just can't see how a league like in France, but I understand commercially with the TV deal, Canal Plus, it's a completely different model. How players in there can get paid a significant amount of money, and the URC is the same. Speak about Leinster, obviously there is no salary cap. Yet in the English Premiership, where we've got one of the best leagues in the world, we're completely pulling back on what players can get paid. And I'm a big believer in there's no loyalty in sport. Yes, there is a little bit, but mainly there's not, because, you know, I don't know who's looking after you from Bath for your body and your shoulders and stuff like that. Exactly. There is nothing. So there is no loyalty in sport. It's a short career. Genji obviously came out and said, you know, he wants to get paid as much as he can, of course. The coaches are getting paid as much as they want to get paid, of course. And that's where I just feel with the salary cap, there's got to be a limit. I get that. But I do feel as if, well, one, it's got out of control, we know that, and maybe these are the reasons why it's got to. I don't believe it is. I don't believe we're at this point with Worcester and with other clubs because the salaries have got out of control. I think there's other elements to it. Again, we can probably talk about that as well. But you're big on the salary cap and salaries not being as high as I believe they should be.
What is my fee for today? Sorry.
Love. Love.
Are we going for lunch?
Love. I'm going to take you for a steak. Hey, it's a great steak. Smith and Walensky's, big shout out to them next door.
Cheap. Don't worry about it. I'll email someone. I think that comparing, naturally, you know, you compare the Premiership to the top 14. It's what you do. It's a version of like for like, isn't it? It's domestic competition. But that's like saying, my neighbour's got a Ferrari. Why can't I have a Ferrari? We're both in marketing. Yeah, but he earns 400 grand a year and you earn 100 grand a year. You can't have a Ferrari. He earns more than you. He works for a different company that pay more. So it is like for like in the sense that it's domestic rugby league, but their TV rights packages are significantly more valuable. They have two competitive leagues, the top 14 and the Pro D2, which I think is makes a massive difference because you have competitive large crowds in Pro D2. You have big name clubs dropping down and giving credibility and visibility to the second tier. And the crowds are generally bigger. There are Pro D2 crowds which are the same, bigger than Premiership crowds. I'm right in saying on average. So there is more visibility televisually. There are more spectators, and all that sort of stuff. So you can compare it if you want, but whatever you think the players should get paid. Firstly, I'm not one of those guys who bitter because the lads get more than I do. They don't. I earn tons. No, I didn't. I bugger all. But no one's getting sick. No. But I want the lads to earn as much as possible. But no matter what you want and what you think it should look like, and the nice view of it and say, we're going to stop attracting the best athletes because they're going to go somewhere else because we can only pay them 150 bags instead of 500 bags, that sort of stuff. They're all legitimate concerns. And your desires are all legitimate because they're yours. But you cannot get away from the fact that rugby doesn't have enough money Premiership clubs do not have enough money to pay players what they are currently paying them and break even. Not just players, for their outgoings to where they're currently. Most Premiership clubs they don't bring in as much as they spend. They are losing money, right? Lots and lots of these clubs are losing money, which simply means that unless they can transform their revenues, which would be pretty handy because then they'll have more spending money, until that happens, they have to reduce their outgoings on the pitch and off it, by the way, or it remains an unsustainable model. Now, the key thing is that's the first step you've got to take. So I wholly support the reduction in salary cap. And the lads probably hate that because it means there are lads getting paid less. I get it. Didn't happen to us. I get it. But I wholly support that because the clubs can't afford to pay them out. And all you need is the one more owner to say, do you know what? I'm out. Sod this. I'm out. I'm losing 3 million quid a year, 2 million quid a year. I can't be asked anymore. Unless I'm worth 300 million, these are big chunks of money, right? So they are anyway. So I think there's that. But I think then you have to, I think that's the first step to take is reduce outlay, is reduce your outgoings, because we all want rugby to be sustainable and be confident. The safety thing, the financial thing. What we're talking about here is the financial thing going into the future. Let's pay players more. If you're losing £1 million and you sign 2 players for 500, you are then losing £2 million unless you can produce £1 million of extra revenue because of those 2 players, which leaves you back at square one, losing £1 million, right? So it doesn't work. Your financial advisor would never advise you to spend more on the same stuff that's causing you to lose all this money. It doesn't happen. It's a nice vision, but it doesn't work that way, I don't think. So there's that, and then first step, reduce outgoings. Second step, but ideally happening concurrently, is think of ways to boost revenue, boost visibility, grow the value of the game so that TV rights they basically reimburse club owners. They pay the game more, pay the clubs more. There's that. And I think a great way to do that is one way to do that is to try and aim, it'll take a while, but aim at the French system of having 2 really competitive, fully televised leagues. I think it'd be really, really appealing. And I think maybe there are too many games, right? Everyone agrees rugby players play too many games. Why don't you make the league smaller? Like have 8 in one, 8 in another, 10 in one, 10, whatever it is, 2 leagues of whatever it is. So actually you've got some big names. You'd have Bristol, Bath, you'd have big names dropping into the second tier for this season, but there is competitive element, there's promotion, relegation. This is all pie in the sky, but what it does
problem solving though.
Well, it reduces the number of games, which is vital. It because that shouldn't be an arbitrary number. I think that should be properly enforceable, and players shouldn't be able to play more than a certain number of games, whatever position they play. But it reduces the number of games in theory. It makes there are smaller blocks of games, so it addresses another clear problem in English rugby, which is me buying a season ticket and the star players aren't playing in half the games because they're away. That's completely bizarre to me. Always has been. It's completely bizarre. And you've got owners paying massive salaries to lads who ain't there. They're off doing something even harder. So when they finally come back, having been paid all the while, a lot of them, they're more tired than they would have been had they stayed. They sometimes get injured. There's all that stuff. Not everyone's Dan Cole and can just do it for 79 minutes a week for 300 years. There ain't many built like him. So I wonder if, in terms of boosting revenues to, reduce losses and eventually see clubs break even, and what we want is make profit, because then no matter how many times you call rugby a business, only then do these, whatever they're called, franchises, clubs, businesses, organisations, whatever, I don't know, whatever they're called, only then do they become attractive to any investor, because you have a model that doesn't see you losing millions of pounds a year. So I want Ellis Genge to earn £1 million. I just love watching him. I love the bloke. I love everything about him, right? You can't pay him £1 million. You can't, because you haven't got the money. You haven't got the money. What you're doing is, Jim, you're being generous with someone else's money, and you're accepting that someone else who's rich is going to suffer a massive loss. And I think if you were the person losing all that money, I don't think you would pay them more, because you would guarantee that in the short to medium term, that is money not money down the drain, because you get a player for it. That is definitely increasing your loss, 100%.
I wouldn't be buying a sports team or a rugby team necessarily to make money. It's easy saying that because I'm never going to buy one. Never know if this takes off. If this flies, Rogan style, then I might. Yeah, I don't know if I'd buy Worcester though. Maybe Wasps, because they're Coventry. I know they're looking for a buyer. Yeah, but that is my emotional quick fix. And look, it isn't sustainable, but I don't know enough about the other sports, so I am shooting from the hip, and I'm talking rubbish in some sense that people think. You give a much detailed answer. This brings me back to the whole Saracens thing. Now, what we're seeing, or what we saw at Saracens, is similar to what I think we'll see with Leicester. Now, Leicester have got a fantastic academy, some brilliant players coming through. Let's name a few of them. George Martin, the Chesham brothers, Freddie Stewart, who's not agreed a contract yet because he obviously wants more than 200 grand that he's probably been offered, and they can't, either afford to pay him, which I think they can afford to pay him, but they can't fit him in the salary cap. Yeah. But what we saw at Saracens was actually, by being as hardworking and diligent and supportive to the academy system, because remember, Saracens before, no disrespect, Flats, back in the day, they had these superstars, didn't work. What they focused on was
me.
You're a superstar now. You profile's higher. You're up there with Pina. I was out for dinner.
I was only there because I was cheap.
He was asking for your front, so I was asking for you.
Good bloke, isn't he?
Great bloke. Loves to talk. But I mean, I listen to him all day.
Doesn't ask that many questions, but he's a great bloke.
Whatever he says goes.
Yeah, I love it.
So he had this idea on rugby. It was very different to yours and mine, but I forgot what it was. But Saracens back in the day, they produced Jackson Rays, George Cruz, Maro Itoje,
Nick
Azikwe, Farrell, Tompkins obviously come through there, Alex Good came through there. So these lads are working through the academy, getting paid a nominal amount. They come through. To what point they want to get paid? Obviously, because they go on to play for England, they go on to become British and Irish Lions. We're seeing that with Leicester now. Van Poortvliet coming through, scrum half. I don't know what he gets paid. It wouldn't be much, but at some
Soon
point,
will be much.
Exactly. But so the salary cap is stopping these homegrown players being able to earn. So it's almost like debilitating. It's almost like, well, what's the point? What's the point investing in these players? Because at some point we're going to be sending them off to a Bath or a Bristol or to France to go and get paid. Because now players are thinking, well, there's not a lot of loyalty in the sport. My career's short. The health issues and stuff, we're watching these old fuckers coming out of the game and they're fucked. I need to get paid as much as I can. And this is where my mind is when Genji mentions, I just want to get paid. He's gone to Bristol, by the way, on a pay cut, as he bollocks. But
well, I'm sure they couldn't put that in a press release if it wasn't true. Maybe it's not as big a pay cut as he would have to have worn at Leicester. Maybe. I don't know.
Or year one's a pay cut, year 2 and 3.
I hope he's getting loads. That's what I hope.
Well, I imagine year 2 and 3 is one of the best players in the world, in my opinion,
Me
as
too,
well.
yeah.
So that is where shooting from the hip, if a Nigel Ray or a Dominic Sylvester or a Lansdowne at Bristol, clearly, and I've only named 2, there's obviously 10 other clubs.
That was 3, but yeah.
Yeah, okay. Want to invest and I say invest because you're looking for a return on investment, want to own a rugby team, then why can't we give them the ability to do what they want to do and buy success or buy and have the best players at their team? Because that is what they do in France. But I know the model's different commercially and they've got money coming in from Canal Plus, but surely the only way we're going to grow in the championship and the model that you've mentioned as well is by people coming in with fuck you money, being like, you know what, I'm probably ain't going to get a return on this. Because one thing we'll talk about after this is the media and how messed up that is in terms of rights and, you know, there's not one place to consume rugby, so therefore you're actually alienating more fans because it's more difficult to be able to watch it on TV and pay for it. But that is solely shooting from the hip, is if someone wants to come in and pay a player X amount, why can't we allow them to do that? Because ultimately, if Worcester or a Newcastle or a Glasgow or an Edinburgh whose salary, I mean, then you think compared to Leinster, say 14, 15 million, Glasgow, Edinburgh only put 3.5. So that they've decided where their salary cap is. They've decided their level. Do you know what I mean? Well, so they don't even spend up to the cap because there ain't one. So why can't we allow a Wasps, if they don't want to put in 5 mil, but they only want to put in 3? Because they're not going to be competitive anyway. So, and when it gets to Europe, so you're talking about the guy with the Ferrari, you know, and the Ford Focus that you own. Obviously, you're not allowed to race them in the street, but the Ferrari is going to be quicker than the Ford Focus. So when it gets to Europe and you're playing against Toulouse and Montpellier and all these teams and Leinster, then surely you can't go into that game. You're hoping on a one-off that you can have this big dream against them. But ultimately, with the amount of games in the Premiership, with the internationals, and then Europe as well, you ain't going to win. So therefore, that competition's undervalued as well. There's so much to talk about. I know that there's a lot going on, but that is my opinion on why I don't think there should be a salary cap. But maybe not a salary cap. I think there should potentially be, I think it should be, going back to our media, tier 1, tier 2, and then maybe a tier 3 of players. So tier 1 is the elite of the elite, and there should potentially be a level, whatever that number is, Flats, 500 grand, 750 grand, or you can go as high as Pietà, £1 million. And maybe you should have access to 5 players that are in that. And then I'm spitballing here. And then tier 2, up to 300 grand, 350 grand. They're your Scotland internationals. I wish I got paid that. You know?
Mate, Hoggy's tier 1, mate. Hoggy's tier 1.
Yeah, but, well, he argues that he's tier 1, but he's a Lion, so that takes you into tier 1.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And then you've got the rest. So
He's
I'm
got $1 million teeth, mate. I'll say that.
He looks $1 million.
Looks like a China doll.
He actually looks a bit weird now. He looks like the old Barbie doll, who's now.
It's like the sort of 75-year-old Hollywood actress or actor that you look at and you're like, whoa, he looks a bit LA.
Mickey Rourke.
Mickey Rourke.
Yeah, that's him.
Mickey Hogg. Yeah.
So he wants to be tier 1. In my mind, I'm trying to work out how the game grows, how they can compete, how players get paid more, but understanding the commercial model clearly doesn't work. And, you know, Simon Orridge's messaged me as well, saying stop saying this, stop supporting Genji. Mark Evans thought the same. And I can't look at it and be like, well, Pietau's getting paid £1 million.
Why shouldn't he?
Why shouldn't he? Why can't Genji get there? Why can't Freddie Stewart, now he's one of the best fullbacks in the world, get 500 grand? Why is he blocked by a rule and, you know,
Well,
the book around the salary cap.
It's 17 questions in one.
I know. It's an opinion. It was an opinion, not for you to answer, but that's just an
But
opinion.
in sort of I guess in response to that, I think that there are various reasons. If you continue to base what you think players should get paid on competing in Europe, I think you further endanger the English game, because Ireland have got their house in order because they're centrally contracted and there ain't many teams and they can rest who they want when they want, and good on them. They will likely do better in Europe more consistently with that model. They can spend more money, they can rest guys. Guys play fewer games, more cash, they don't leave. So
bigger squads,
retention's great,
player welfare.
Squad, right. So nailed it. The Premiership is not centrally funded. Maybe you could argue it should have been, missed an opportunity. It's not. So there are individuals and consortiums or whatever protecting their own interests that don't always tie in with that of the rugby union. This, it was ever thus since it went pro. So then the French just have more money because the TV channels just give them a lot more money. Okay, they earn a lot more money. They play shed loads of games in France. Brutal. Never ending. Top 14s. There's 200 teams in it. It's only one team building the Prem, but it's a kind of an endless season. We used to be in the middle of pre-season, the top 14 lads were playing, and you're like, oh my God. And you finish the season and they're still playing. You're like, oh my God. Imagine playing in France. No wonder they get paid more. Buggering off to France for more money, losing all the English talent because the salary cap is more difficult now because there are French, foreign player quotas in squads. So there ain't this big exodus anymore. Ain't happening. Japan traditionally doesn't take that many players. It certainly doesn't take that many English players. So that isn't a massive worry. So I, like you, want the lads, so to speak, the top pros to get paid what they should pay. And what's going to happen if they can't earn the 500 grand a year they think the market should be paying? They think they should be paid. They might go. Some of them might go. Most of them won't. You got the shit kicked out of you for years mostly on less than 500 grand, except when you went to France. You got the shit kicked and still you stayed. People get to this point. They get to professional level. People want money. People want Range Rovers and flash trainers and that sort of stuff. People want to get their hair done for free, their plugs done for free and their teeth done for free in Exeter. People want that, the perks that come with it. But the players get there because they love the game. I think the notion that half the best players, up and coming England players, aren't going to stay in the game because they can only earn £250,000 a year instead of a bit more or whatever. They can only earn a lot instead of a shitload is unlikely. If it happens, address it. If there's a massive talent drain, where are they going to go? They ain't going to football, too competitive. Where are they going to go, mate? Rugby players generally aren't that good at other sports because they're lumps, right? They're sort of specialist athletes. So not like sod them where they're going to go. I think it's unlikely they will leave. Some might think, sod this, I'll go to the city. Good on them. I might have done that halfway through my career and I had that many injuries, but I didn't. So I'm glad I didn't. Now, in terms of academy lads coming up and everyone needs paying, well, he was on this much and now he deserves this much because he was a kid and now he's a first teamer and international. That is where you have to see players just not being offered contracts anymore. So it's ruthless. But if Jack Van Portfleet, JVP, has come in and you've got Youngsy and you've got Wiggy there, I presume, I don't care what the lads' contracts are, but those two won't be cheap. Youngsy certainly won't. And then JVP comes and demands money. Well, you might have to let one of those guys go. That's how it works. Mark Evans, the genius, you've spoken to him a lot. When the whole Sarries thing happened, he said one of the key indicators for him was that they reached the top and won, but no one ever left. So what happens is, in the NRL, for example, is his example, you just can't win year after year after year so easily because your players' stock rises as you're winning, as the team improves, and you can't afford to keep them because otherwise you're just going massively into debt, spending money you haven't got, breaking caps. So players leave. So unfortunately, if academy players come through and they are so valuable that you can't afford to lose them, you need to pay them a version of what they're worth on the market with salary caps accounted for, and someone has to go. That is how it goes. That is how it goes. And the notion of just paying them anyway, because it's not their fault, is a cap. Why should there be a cap? You're plunging English rugby, Premiership rugby, further into debt, making it less and less sustainable. And the reason I think that probably doesn't scare you that much, Jim, is because for now, all the clubs that turned pro, apart from Richmond, the clubs that went pro basically are still there. So you think they'll always be there. But what if they're not? What if this, this cost of energy crisis, the cost of living crisis forces people think that the super rich just get richer in recessions and during lockdown and COVID. What if some of them don't? And they say, one thing I'm not going to do anymore is lose 2 or 3 million quid on this rugby club. I'm out. And then no one comes in to buy it because it's a crap business model that loses money. Or it's not crap. It's not a viable business model because it loses money. So you are making the game literally less sustainable every time you pay someone more. Every time you just go more. It doesn't matter to a point what the players say they're worth. If the clubs don't have the money, they can't spend it because it just makes the game less and less sustainable. And it's Bristol. They started playing brilliantly. Pat Lam took over and they had Piutau, Luatua, they had Big Sink, they had Nathan Hughes, class, Madigan, and then you got like the Piers O'Connors, the Urins, the Harry Randalls, all those lads that come through.
Joyce,
Joyce, one of my favourites.
Hell of a break last year.
Yeah, great. Yeah, I wish they'd scored.
I know.
Anyway, but they rightly need to have pay rises because they've gone from being on the fringes, they're regular first team players. But if there is this much in the cap and there's not enough to pay them, they either go bye-byes, they accept less, or someone at the top, the club decides someone at the top, a top earner has to go to make room for them. That is how it works. And if you just also talk about the value of the Premiership, you want your TV rights to go up, you need the product to be as good as possible, the league as a whole to be as good as possible. If you let the 2 or 3 uber rich owners spend 3 times what everyone else spends, it will be a shit league because you'll have teams that can't win against them. You can't. There was a point during the whole Sarries thing before they, for want of a better phrase, got caught, where it didn't matter whether they rested most of their first team because their second team was basically as good as every other Premiership first team. Right, well done you. So there was that. And although I love watching them play and love all the guys there and Nigel Ray, I will respect and very much like Nigel Ray to the day I die. I know him pretty well. I know his family well. But what they did, and what happened. So it just makes it. You'll end up with a couple of super clubs. And it's crap. It's just not as good. There's no brutal away days.
What if there was 5 or 6?
It's not enough, Jim. You ideally what you want, I think, is, as I said, I'm spitballing. I haven't given it enough thought. Really, I've been on holiday. I think you probably want to reduce the number of teams in the Prem, make a second league with the really ambitious Championship clubs, and probably have 2 conferences or whatever you call them. And that's the sort of thing that probably never happened because it's too big. But it does serve to, maybe sort of revive a bit of interest, give exposure to new clubs, all that sort of stuff, reduce the number of games. But if you do something like that and you've got Bristol allowed to spend 12 million quid a year and Ealing are spending 4, that it suddenly, what's the point in doing it? Because everyone's not, it becomes Formula One. If you've got 2 teams with amazing cars and everyone else driving bangers, it's fun, but you kind of know who's going to win. So when you kind of know who's going to win and jeopardy is diluted, I think sport loses its appeal. It's Joshua Usyk the other day, boxing's a completely different thing. I actually genuinely feel guilty about watching boxing sometimes because I feel like the heads and the brains and what we know and all that stuff. I still watch it. So I'm an absolute hypocrite. I still pay my 20 quid and watch it, right? But $26.95, wasn't it?
It was expensive. It was worth it. We got a full fight though.
Cost of living, mind. But you got all that. If you are confident who's going to win, it's just not as appealing. It just isn't. If it's a nobody, would you come home early from pub or dinner out to watch Joshua against a nobody? If you're an on the fence fan, maybe not. I wouldn't. Would I get home early? Did I leave early to watch Joshua Usyk? Yes, I did, because I wasn't sure what's going to go down. So you need jeopardy, and if you have super clubs, you lose that.
So you're not going to watch Europe this year? You're not going to watch?
No,
Champions
I love it,
Cup?
but if the whole argument for making English rugby club, Premiership rugby clubs less and less sustainable by the season, less likely to be taken over by anyone sensible if an owner decides they've had enough or wants to retire or whatever, sick of losing money. If the only metric by which you gauge the success of English clubs is how well they compete, do you know what? You might have to take Europe on the chin a little bit for a few years. Get your own house in order. The Irish house is centrally funded and in order. French rugby is in a much better place. The model is better. They have more money. Their house finally is in order. The union and the clubs are one in terms of communication. The English rugby's house is not in order. So you need to get it in order before you start worrying about competing with people who've got their shit together. That's what I think. And there are some big decisions to be made. And I think, it's like as soon as this Worcester stuff comes out, which is just frigging grim. One option is, right, give every club in the Prem, the other 12 clubs, an extra 500 grand, an extra 10% to try and absorb these players. All right, what about the 80 lads who stopped being Premiership rugby players the end of last season out of contract? It's not fair to them either.
No.
Well, let's get them in. Let's give every club an extra $1 million. Okay, but all these clubs are losing £1 million already. Now they're losing 2 because revenues are not suddenly going to transform. So what's happening at Worcester, we hope it gets sorted. Of course we do. If a load of lads end up out of contract and people out of work, it is a horrible, gruesome, unnecessary way to get actually a step closer to where Premiership rugby needs to be, which is actually spending less money. You don't want it to happen to just one club. You want it to happen all clubs at the same level. It's not the way you'd want to do it. But you can't just say, oh, this is really unfortunate. It's crap for the lads. Here's an extra load of money, because you're perpetuating the unsustainability. So it's really, really difficult. And because it isn't fair on all the other lads who ain't got contracts now that had them last year.
You're too nice in all this. You are like, you've got your hat on of the clubs, of obviously the owners, of the clubs that don't want to spend. Like, I think it's an admirable place to be, like I really do. And you contextualise it well. Just lastly from me, the chicken and the egg scenario, let's just keep it really basic, is the growth of the game and also the appeal of kids coming into play. And they look at an Ellis Genge, and let's talk about him because we both love him. And say he's capped at 150, 200 grand a year, which is a decent amount of money. I get that. But in the grand scheme of professional sports, we know what he can do. We know the value of other players in his position globally is significantly more. Now, we know he's getting paid more than that. But the appetite to become an Ellis Genge, not only to look like Ellis Genge and play like Ellis Genge, but to be paid like Ellis Genge. The appetite, surely, as a youngster coming through, like football, and I know I always use the analogy, we shouldn't because it's a completely different sport.
We can't, but we do. Yeah.
Of course we do, because it's the biggest sport in our countries. So we're going to use that. But the appetite to be a professional footballer is the profile, but also the money, right? So we're asking kids to come through now and be like, right, be a professional rugby player, but you're not going to. You make decent money, maybe. If you're playing the championship, you're making fuck all. But if you can make it to the top level, but there's going to be this constant restriction because we just don't want to pay you. There's a part of me, and I do flip-flop on this, in seeing what Maritoji's done. And he's hanging out with DJ Kelly. When I was with Francois Pienaar, I was actually sat next to DJ Kelly.
Were you?
He didn't know rugby. He said he did on his Instagram when he was with Maro, but he clearly didn't, because he didn't know me or Francois.
Another one. God, that bloke annoys me, mate.
I know, yeah. It's small. Smaller than you think. Very small. Quite big as well.
I feel horrible. I'm sure he's a lovely bloke, but the whole
I don't know.
"we the best music" thing, it's just like I'd flick on, mate. I've got a little button on my steering wheel, and if I hear that, mate, I'm out.
Just flick forward.
Oh, get off, mate.
Billy Joel.
Yeah.
But the appetite to become a professional rugby player going forward, there is a carrot of being financially paid highly. And this comes back to the point where we're talking about where we are in rugby at the minute, from a safety point of view, from an interest point of view, and from a financial point of view. We are in this sticky zone, aren't we? And I go back to my point, if a Nigel Ray or a Lansdowne want to pay someone a significant amount of money because they think it's going to enhance their club, it's going to bring people to the stadium to watch them play, to make a hero out of them, and there's an individuality about that. I know rugby's the ultimate team sport. I like that.
Yeah, but it leaves everyone else behind.
Yeah,
it leaves everyone else behind. That makes the overall product crap. It waters it down. It waters it down quite quick. It just does. And I think, and do you know what? If rugby players can only earn, for almost everyone who's going to become a professional rugby player, earning the sort of salaries you're talking about as being, in inverted commas, shit salaries. We know they're not. I know you don't think they are. That's a lot of money is one thing. Firstly, it's a lot of money to almost everybody. Almost everyone in the UK, what Premiership rugby players can earn is a lot of money. Right, there's that. There will be the odd player who does his A-levels or her A-levels, because the women's rugby will go the same way at some point. They seem to be doing things more sensibly on the financial front, frankly, but
slower, yeah,
but that's better a lot of the time.
Well, it's hindsight, isn't it?
They got all the they can learn from mistakes and all that stuff. So let's talk about the men's game. Is what we're talking about here. You've got lads finishing sixth form at whatever school, and they've got an option, and they could go and start a job at a bank, they could go to uni, they could take the salary, knowing the odd one will think, do you know what, that's not enough. Do you know what, I want to be earning more than that when I'm 30, when I'm 25. There'll be the odd one. I bet you there are hardly any. Being a professional rugby player for kids who've played rugby since they were little kids it's such a dream. It's such a passion. That's how they've got to the point of being offered a contract, that they want money. We all want money. We all like money, but it's not their sole motivation. It wasn't yours. It was nice to get a bigger contract as time went on. I wasn't thinking I want to be pro so I can get paid what Jason Leonard gets paid. I wasn't, I doubt. But was Ellis Genge, when he grew up, smashing people when he was 14, 15, was he thinking, I just want to get paid what Trevor Woodman gets paid? He's probably thinking there's some nice cash there, but that, I'm very, very sure that it wasn't his sole motivation. So I think that the idea of capping Premiership players' salaries at shitloads instead of absolutely shitloads in real terms, I think the numbers you would lose would be vanishingly few. That's what I think. I think you'd hardly lose any. And the idea of just whacking all the lads' numbers up, why shouldn't Nigel be allowed to? Why shouldn't Steve Lansdown be able to do that? You leave everyone behind and you dilute the products, what you do. And you all the while make these clubs, these businesses, inverted commas, less and less viable. They lose more and more money because revenues don't double as their salary outlay goes. The salary bill doubles, it doesn't. So Steve Lansdown ain't going anywhere. But if he decided to, or if you've got a club owner somewhere who gets poorly one day and decides I want to pull back a little bit, I'm out. No one's buying it, mate, and it's gone. None of these clubs is completely safe unless they're breaking even. They're a decent financial proposition for potential new owners and investors. That's the point, I think.
Well, I imagine when Genji plays against Cyril Byrne, he's been paid 3 times the amount of him. He might injure him just because he's that angry.
Yeah, but do you know what it's like, mate?
I know, we can go on for this for days. But it's like, sorry.
Do you know what? I'd choose to live in Bath. I like living in Bath. If I wanted to live somewhere else where I could get a bigger house with a bigger garden and a big driveway,
don't say Northampton,
and a swimming pool,
go
not
on,
to say Northampton. Where are you from? Can't say cool. If I wanted to move somewhere else and get more from, that's where I choose to be. These lads have ended up playing in the Premiership, where you get paid loads of money to play sport. You don't get paid in some circumstances as much as some of the lads in France. Well, tough nuts, mate. The lads in New Zealand don't get paid what you get paid. A lot of the lads in South Africa, that's why they want to come here. There are a lot of places around the world where doing exactly the same job, lads get less money than you do. So you are in a market that remunerates players, remunerates you really, really well. It's remunerated players a bit too well. That's why clubs are struggling financially. That's one of the reasons, I think. So they pull it back a little bit. You ain't struggling. You ain't struggling for bread and milk at the end of the week. It's not as much you could be earning if you'd been born in Dublin and played for Leinster. Well, I mean, I say this gently, but that's just sort of tough shit, isn't it? It's just where you landed. You're
really well placed to talk about this, and I don't know how I'm going to migrate around asking the question, but I'm going to ask it because it's something on my mind, and a big UFC fan. Stick with me here. UFC have got a fantastic model, a blood sport, a contact sport.
Yeah.
The men's part of that has grown astronomically to the point where they've now brought the women. Well, Ronda Rousey a few years ago came in. Now women's UFC is huge. It's crazy to watch.
Yeah.
Rugby feels like it's been forced into this position of growing women's rugby. We're talking about all this right now around men's rugby being on its fucking knees, on its arse. Some are on their back and some are underground, right?
Yeah.
Where there's this appetite, of course, but also there's this pressure to grow women's rugby, yet there's no money in the men's game at the minute. So how do you feel about when you talk about that? Because I know you are a genuine advocate for that. You commentate, you're doing the graft in the media, you're helping because you have such a high profile now in the media, in the women's space as well. Like, do you see what I mean? The question, have I asked a question there?
No.
Yes, so there seems to be like we're trying to push now for the women's game when there isn't the finance to push the men's game at the minute. Yet on one side why are we not doing this? Why are we not doing that? The women need to be paid significantly more when we haven't got the men's part of it in order. Do you know what I mean? Do you
yeah.
It's a tough question to answer, but it's something that I'd love to talk to you about.
I think there are some men who think that women's sport is being forced upon them. I think it isn't. I think you can just not watch it if you don't want to watch it. It's not forced upon anybody. I think that women's rugby, for example, the football, the Euros was frigging great.
How good was the
It's
final,
class,
mate?
mate. It's just absolutely class.
How physical were they?
It's class, mate. Yeah,
Not
I love
that,
it.
Not that I can base another human
Mate,
on
a
their
couple of horrible
physicality,
units
but I
in
kind of,
there,
yeah,
mate.
exactly.
A couple of horrible units in there. I loved it. And, you know, giving it all the verbals, dropping it. It's great, mate. Dropping knees, coming in late on the old Achilles, proper Vinnie Jones gear. I liked it. But it's not forced upon anybody. Comparisons with the men's game in rugby are completely predictable. It's always going to happen, and a lot of them are fair and reasonable. A lot of them kind of are pointless. It's a different sport in a sense, same sport, but same but different. I think that in a sense, because it's been forced upon the women's game to move more slowly, because there's less visibility, there are fewer playing numbers for sort of forever nationally. Because it was seen as a boys' sport until very recently, right, in the grand scheme of rugby, seen as largely as a boys' sport. Of course, girls and women have always played, but they weren't the numbers that there were of boys. So that's changing, and I think that what they're doing right, probably because they kind of have to do it right, is take it slow financially. Take it slow. So when was the last World Cup? 2017 final I was there with ITV doing the World Cup over in Belfast. I think it was at Ulster. I can't remember. I think it was at Ulster. And England started well, and New Zealand came back and won it and all that. The numbers were, I remember 2.35 million people watched that on telly. That's a lot, considering pretty much no women's rugby had been on telly. Not much of it at all, really, before. That's big numbers. That is, I realise it's terrestrial TV. It's not BT Sport or Sky. But compare that to Bath Leicester on a Friday night. I mean, it's 10 times the numbers roughly, right? Because it's free telly, which helps. People don't have to watch it. People who pay for subscriptions tend to watch more sport because they're keynotes, hence they're paying, and they've paid for it, so want to get their money's worth. Terrestrial viewership is all optional. It's all discretionary. So it's often a really true number. Those numbers rise. You look at the November games that England played at Six Ways against the USA. Not a great game, 89-0 to England. Packed crowd. Really great vibe. People love it. 89-0 was probably perfect, really, for the sort of new viewers and the kids, because there's loads of tries to cheer. They're not concerned. Kids aren't concerned necessarily about, competitive games and all that sort of stuff. So I think that women's sport, when you say it's forced upon you, it's got more column inches than ever before. It's on TV more than ever before. If you don't like it as much, that's cool. I think I've never been bothered about whether it's men's or women's particularly, because I'll tell you two reasons, and I'll be completely frank about it. One, it's just sport. I just like sport. I'm not a sports addict at all, but I just like sport. So when, women started coming to the UFC, I very happily watch that. I don't turn it off because it's a woman. So, oh my God, they're going to smack the shit out of each other. This is going to be great. So Ronda Rousey in particular, I was probably in love with her for a period of time, Jim. There's that. And also, it's my job to research, read around, prep and commentate on sport. It's my job. So I get paid to do that, right? I do it because I love it, but I wouldn't do it for free because I wouldn't have any time to do anything else. People that say I play rugby for free. No, you wouldn't. Not professional. Can't train all day, every day and play at weekends and not have another job. You can't have a full-time job for free. You can't do it. So unless you won the Euros. So I wouldn't, but being completely frank about it, I get paid the same to do men's or women's. So I've just never cared about, do you want to do Women's World Cup? Yeah, great. I really enjoy it. I like the games. Doing what we do, it's not like the commentators of old where you do a Saturday afternoon, no one ever sees you again. You maybe have a faceless column in a magazine. We're interacting with players all the time. So I've got to know lots of these girls, spend a lot of time with a lot of these girls. A lot of them I'd call mates. We're not best friends, like I'm not best friends with a lot of the rugby lads, but we're mates, a lot of us. So it's my job. I really enjoy my job. And if someone said you got the National Schools Championship final coming up at Twickenham, it's on ITV and same standard contract, yeah, I'll do that. No problem. I don't really care who's playing, to be honest. I don't mind who's playing. That's the point. So there's that. And if you feel like it's being forced upon you, you ain't got to watch it. Like boxing is not forced upon me. I choose to watch it. I don't watch a lot, but I choose it. It's not forced. But the day after the Joshua fight or the few days after that, I look on my newspaper apps on my phone and whatever, and it's just all the columns are about that. There's a lot of coverage, but it's not. I haven't got to read it. That's. I'm interested to read it, but I think there's way more visibility of it but that doesn't mean it's forced upon you, because I think it isn't. It's all discretionary. It's all optional. I just happen to like it.
That's why I asked you the question. I might not have contextualised it as well as you've answered. Well, no, I haven't. Not maybe. But I think it's important, Flats, because there's not many people, or can I call you, your arms up big, an alpha male who talks about it like that. And I spoke about it with Ben Gulliver when we were chatting about the champ, and his wife played for England and Saracens, and we was not stumbling through talk. I was, because it's not something that I'm used to, albeit I've got my wife and 2 girls at home and equal opportunity and everything, and we watched the football and we loved it. But you're in it, and people might ask why you are in it, because you're in the men's game, you're in the women's game as well. And I think you've contextualised it really well, because the majority of our listeners are going to be men. And males.
With all the other stuff you and I've got going on, like, would I commentate on 30 men's games a year for free? No, because that means I'm leaving my family at weekends. I love my job, but I do a lot of prep, like you do, like we all do, a lot of prep. I'm leaving my family at weekends. I'm missing my kids' parties. I'm missing dinners with my mates. I'm missing weddings all the time, all that sort of stuff. Be funeral soon, Jim, the age we're getting to. Missing all that stuff. Would I do that for free? No, not as much as I do. I do bits. I wouldn't do it. Would I do 30 women's games a year for free? No, it's my job. I love my job, but it is my job. So for me, it's not a lot more complicated than that. It's just my job. And if I really didn't like women's rugby for whatever reason, I wouldn't do those jobs. I'm not obsessed by fees and that sort of stuff. I wouldn't do those jobs, but I like them. And I think I look like an alpha male, and I'm confident and I'm big and that sort of stuff, but I'm probably not that alpha, in that you said I'm too nice about things. What I really try and do is I never manage it properly. I really, really try and achieve balance on opinions, because I've always been quite reactive, emotionally quite reactive, and my sort of chemical reactions to things are generally quite close to the surface. Doesn't mean I'm a crazy bastard. It means I can get, I was reading David Walsh's column on the, about Cadogan on the way up, and I've read it before, and I realised I read it and kind of took most of it in, but the kids were there. Down in Devon, the kids were, so I put it away and thought, I've properly read it today. I'm bawling, mate, halfway through that. And I'm generally, things are reasonably close to the surface. Generally laughs are generally quite close to the surface, but other things can be too. And I think I don't try and pander to everyone. I mean, what I'm effectively saying about, for example, the financial state of English rugby is that I don't necessarily think it's perilous, but it's not great. What I'm effectively saying is I don't think the players should be paid as much as they think they should be paid in a lot of cases. And I'm then going to go out and see all the players in the Premiership for the next 8 or 9 months. So I'm saying that this player JVP might want a zillion quid. He can't have it unless Youngsy loses his contract or Wiggy gets binned, whatever. You know what I mean? That's what I'm actually saying. So those things aren't necessarily nice, but hopefully there is an element, a degree of balance to my views, because I read stuff and see stuff, and my initial reaction is that's bullshit, not having it. And then I think imagine I'm being asked a question on telly, is what I think. Let's actually try and achieve a balanced answer about this that, you can't pander to everyone, but isn't just kind of explosive and emotional, because they're fun, but they don't actually get you anywhere a lot of the time.
Well, that's the place I'm still in. I'm trying to get to that place where I breathe, I'm in a nightclub after 30 beers, as in I'm hungover. Someone's Judas me in the back, and I turn around and flip. And I'm in my prime.
You're in your prime. Yeah, you're not last weekend
not
in
right
Ed's
now.
game. It wasn't Billy's game, it was Ed's game. Not them. But no, equally, there's massive value to that. And I say punchy stuff, and I dick around and whatever, and take the piss out of people and mock myself like you do. But you're good value. That's the way you are where you are. Like, people like listening to you, or you wouldn't have this amazing studio, this Rolls-Royce studio. But people like that. But you don't tell people how it is and then earmuff it when they try and answer back. You put things to people, and you listen to alternative perspectives on things. And lots of people don't do that. Lots of people decide how it is. They presume omniscience, and it doesn't work. Like, no one knows everything. No one. Except Stuart Barnes. I often think he knows everything. I think every single thing. But
he used to.
I think that you're allowed to be punchy as long as you're willing to listen to an alternative view. And I am, and you are. I've never found people disagreeing with me to be an act of aggression. If I'm driving 50 in a 60 and someone overtakes me, that's cool. Doesn't offend me. It's like, I'm not I'm a lad. I'm only 61 min. 10% plus 2, 68. We can get away with, I was told once.
And
anyway.
And you're humbly in a $100,000 car as well. But I mean,
No, I
it's
don't
a freebie.
talk about
it's
that.
a freebie.
Which car are you talking about? No, there's not a fleet. There's not a fleet.
Last question, Flats, around the media. Now, I was going to go and talk to you about, but you know, that's already there. It's tier one, absolutely smashing it. But more so players and access to players in the media. Like, do you think there's growth? Because I'm specifically talking about growing the game. We've seen Genji, we've seen Marla, love him, loathe him. I'm a loather. I don't know what I think about Marla. But
don't you?
I don't know. I'm not 100% sure, no.
Why?
Because he don't like me.
Oh, so you don't like him?
I kind of like him, but I don't want to like him. Do you know what I mean? But I think some of it is now. I think before there was a natural part to it. I think now some of it's staged, of course, but he's got a platform and he should go down that route. I think Genji is natural. I love it. I love that. I think it's important. What are you? Because you're a bit traditional. You're a traditionalist as well, aren't you?
I am, yeah.
Do you like them putting themselves out there, or?
I think it's great. Like this whole we need global stars that transcend sport. We need a LeBron James. We need a Michael Jordan, or we need a Ronaldo.
We've tried that with Marrow.
Yeah, fine. I mean, ultimately, if you're going to put someone out, putting someone out there doesn't do it. What does that is someone actually being sufficiently charismatic and engaging that people want to hear from him or her, whether or not they watch the sport they play. Right, that's the point. So some of these lads don't want to be out there. Owen Farrell doesn't want to transcend sport. He wants to kick goals, run a team, and eventually coach.
Get better.
He wants to be elite at what he does forever, and he doesn't need anyone patting him on the back and putting him on telly.
And there's nothing wrong with that.
I respect that. I love that.
Yeah,
I think he's a great bloke. And if I had a team, I'd want him 100%. I'd want him in it 100%.
Everyone speaks about him like that. Everyone.
Yeah, 100%. He's in whatever team I'm running, almost whatever sport, mate. Cricket, he can come and play. I think he's exceptional. But I think you need... These people are engaging, and you've got to remember that. Joe, I really like Joe for what it's worth. And now I want to say something horrible about someone, so you don't think I'm too nice, but I really like Joe, and I like the way he plays. I think he's incredibly honest, and I think his effort levels are enormous, and you can tell that his effort levels have been enormous for a long time. I respect that hugely. And he's very, very good at what he does, and he's got better at what he does, which shows that there's a real work rate, which I respect, sort of blindly, but I respect it. But I think what it's really worth remembering is that, like when you commentate on a game, you and I are not his audience. Current and former professional rugby players are not his audience. We are 0.00001% of the audience. I'm not commentating on, England against USA last weekend, or I'm not commentating on a game this weekend thinking about what Jim and Goody and Shanks and Bolsh and Tins might think of what I'm saying. Of course it enters your mind. The lads will hammer me for that. Of course it enters your mind. We're not the audience. The audience are rugby fans, and they love it. And that there will be lots of people who, when I'm dicking around on telly thinking I'm funny, laughing at my own jokes, there will be ex-pros and current pros who think I'm a dick. There will be, and don't think I'm funny, and they'll be irked by it. If they weren't rugby players, they might not be so irked by it, but they know me a bit, and they might think it's a bit performative or something, or that's not what he really thinks. I mean, it generally is what I think, but we all perform a bit. I think we all do. And people like Joe get people watching rugby content, is a horrible word. Rugby content.
Oh, that's my life.
Exactly. Who otherwise, swap the O for a, who otherwise wouldn't watch it. And I think that's important. I think he's very bright. I think he is an engaging bloke. And we're not bezies or anything like that. But whenever I see him in a car park, or whenever we're in the same place for a beer, which I think has been once ever, I really, really like his company, and think you would too. And that, I try not to get very close to players, so I'm not constantly messaging or trying to meet up or anything like that. I try and keep very separate from all that. And it's difficult because we're so merged with them a lot of time, with so much contact, but I try and keep really separate, except for Will Collier, who plays for Quins, because we talk barbecue shit all the time. So I'm biased towards him now. Helpfully, he's the best scrummager in the Prem, probably, so it makes it a bit easier. But yeah, there's that. I like all of that. I think it's good. And in terms of access to players, this is not what you meant, but access to players in the media, I think we ain't got it right yet. I don't think there is. The media know that without the players and the coaches, we're not there. I think there is insufficient acknowledgement from rugby players and staff that without the media, they're not there, because their dough doesn't come from, it effectively comes from TV, right? Without the media, they need us as much as we need them. And I think that isn't always recognised. I think the clubs are great as a rule. Clubs are really cool with stuff. Most of them, I think, not all of them. Most of them, I don't have to get access much. When I'm doing Six Nations-y stuff or World Cup-y stuff, I am often seeing exactly what access you're getting. And it's really often crap and really restrictive. The Australia tour I've just been on.
So good.
It's really good tour. The access was great. Whatever.
That's what I mean. The Stan Sports, was it there?
Yeah.
Yeah, class.
Loads of access. But also, I think English TV, British TV channels are really up for that. It's just suggest an idea and I'll do it. But quite often it's the teams that say, no, we're not having that.
Old school.
The last World Cup in Japan, the access, mate. I mean, you want me to not be nice about something?
Oh, go on.
Really nice people. Access was a joke. It was like you put an idea forward and I'd say, why don't we take Genge and Sinclair for sushi in Tokyo and just have a chat? Cameras on, just chat. They can have editorial control if they want. It doesn't matter what they say. And then why don't Jamie George and Elliot Daly love coffee? Let's go to this really cool coffee shop, Deus, Mission, whatever it's called. Let's take them there, have coffee and a toasty, and chat shit. No. I then see the players in the street or in the hotel, and I could say to them, "Oh, do you want to?" I would never do that. It's unprofessional. I know the players are up for that. I know they don't mind growing their profiles. Jamie George is amazing with the media. He's completely genuine, articulate. He'd be up for that. It'd be crack. Turn the cameras off. We'll probably stay for half an hour and chat shit because he's a good bloke. No. You've got this area, and it's like you're put in a room the size of this studio with 3 camera crews in it. So you can't do an interview because you can hear the other camera crews. You're in a basement, windowless basement of a hotel in Japan, and you're like, we're meant to be interviewing Joe Marler. Yeah, we know you can't have Joe Marler. Well, Joe doesn't want to do it. Well, no, you can't. No, he doesn't want to do it. 2 minutes later, Joe comes out, or it's something like that. Joe comes out, and he's like, yeah, I'll do as long as you want. We're out there for 20 minutes talking shit. It's absolutely brilliant interview. There's this fear, there was at least this fear from the staff about releasing these players. And I remember getting back, and there was an article about what amazing access there'd been to the England players. I'm like, oh my God, you were not where I was. We couldn't get a fucking thing away. It's like, all we want to do is take them out for dinner. You can come if you want. We're not stitching anyone up. We are the sole broadcaster for the UK. This is it. ITV is it. And you're not letting us take Elliot Daly and Jamie George for a flat white in town. Like, this is mental. So you compare that with the stuff that some of that content there was on Stan Sport is really good access, but a lot of the interviews are actually crap because they're pitch side, they're chained, no one says anything. But some of it was really interesting, and I think the British channels would love to do a lot of that stuff. They're up for it, they're relaxed. But often it's the teams themselves, the management teams, that say no. Not always, but often.
Or just do what Rassie does and just put it all on Twitter.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. With his Bulldogs. Flats, that was absolutely class. For anyone who's not listened, who's just gone straight to the end, basically, we have not solved many problems. We've given opinions. But what I'm gauging from you is you don't want any substitutes. I
want to trial it.
So try no substitutes. So make them run for significantly less money.
Yeah.
Bring Joe Marler on as the next face of ITV and put everything out on social media like Rassie, because that's the platform. I'm joking. Flats, that was absolutely class, mate.
Cheers, Jim. Well done, mate.
Cheers, mate.
Keep going.